Are you interested in discovering the spiritual and theological mysteries of the Old Testament, as well as exploring the current historical and archaeological evidence that supports or confounds the biblical narrative? If so, prepare to have your eyes opened as we journey to Damascus. Hello, and welcome to St. James' Journey to Damascus. We got a great show for you today. We are in the 10th chapter of 1 Kings. We're only going to cover one chapter today. We'll probably just barely make it through that because we are going to meet the lady who I have been talking to you about for a couple of weeks, hoping I'd get there, but I couldn't. And it makes sense because now that we're there, this is going to take up one whole segment. I'm talking about the Queen of Sheba. This is a great biblical story. It is one of those that is not very long. It's only half of the chapter in the book. But this story has inspired legends in countries around the world. It's inspired movies. It's inspired a people to believe that they are the new Jewish race and Israel, outside of Israel. So, this is big stuff. I'm going to get to it right now. I think you're going to find this a lot of fun and very interesting. And so we will get started with that right here. All right, like I said, we are in the 10th chapter of 1 Kings. The woman, Queen of Sheba, is only called the Queen of Sheba. We never actually get a name for her other than that. The story of the queen is a simple one. When she heard of the fame of Solomon, the wisdom he had, and the great wealth that he had accumulated, she came to Israel with a large group of attendants and a great caravan full of gifts of gold and spices and precious jewels. When she met Solomon, she asked him, we're told in the Bible, many great questions of wisdom and tested him on her wisdom from where she was from and everything she knew about. We're told she asked him everything that was on her mind, and he answered all of her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her, we are told. Well, after seeing all that he had built, hearing all that he had to say, she was overwhelmed with amazement, we're told. She was blown away with the food on the tables, the finery of the temple, the clothing that they all wore, the golden goblets and golden ware that they ate with, all of the finery of the kingdom of Israel under Solomon. She said, and I quote, "Everything I heard in my country about your achievements, about your words and wisdom is true. I didn't believe it until I arrived here, and I saw it with my own eyes. In fact, somewhere along here, in fact, I had not heard the half of it. Your wisdom and prosperity are far beyond what I was told. How happy your people must be. What a privilege for your officials to stand here day after day listening to your wisdom. Praise the Lord God who delights in you and has placed you on the throne of Israel because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel. He has made you king so you can rule with justice and righteousness." Wow. What accolades. What a great compliment by somebody who comes to the country from a faraway land with her huge entourage on camels and camels packed with spices and gold and gifts and jewels and all these wonderful things. It then says that she gave him 9,000 pounds of gold and great quantities of spice and precious jewels. Then King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba whatever she asked for, besides all of the customary gifts. And she and all her attendants returned to their own land. Okay, that is the simple accounting of the Queen of Sheba coming to Israel. But of course, we can't leave it there. Everybody from Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hollywood have all expanded on this great story and made it into something quite a bit more. Although, who can blame them? I mean, she traveled all that way. It seems kind of short. I'm sure she didn't just plunk down the gold, say, here's your spices. It's great to see you. It's a great place. We're out of here. No doubt they spent time there. They got to know each other. They talked about different things, different cultures, and perhaps developed a relationship. The same account is given nearly word for word in the second book of Chronicles. So when we get to the second book of Chronicles, we will have a short revisit of the Queen of Sheba and Solomon. But the legend that we encounter is known far and wide, and as I said, is a part of many people's culture to this very day. I told you last week that we weren't absolutely sure where Solomon's mines were, that there were several mines along the coast of Arabia, any one which could have been one of Solomon's mines, or perhaps another place. Likewise, there is legend and stories and controversy surrounding this story as well, as you might imagine. It starts with the location of Sheba. Now, some call it Sheba. I called it that, I'm sure, already several times. I can't help it. That's the Hollywood thing, the Queen of Sheba. It is pronounced Sheba. So here we are. There is indeed a location known for Sheba through history and archaeology that was existent at the time of Solomon. As you can see on the map here, you're looking at the Red Sea as it comes down from Israel and heads towards the Horn of Africa. On your, I guess that would be on this side over here, what you see is Arabia. And on the other side of the Red Sea over there, what you see is, of course, North Africa, Ethiopia. This side over here, today down near the bottom of Arabia would be Yemen. Well, in Yemen is a place called Saba, S-A-B-A. It is modern day, it is in Yemen, and it is the area biblically and archaeologically known as Sheba. However, directly across the Red Sea, over there in Ethiopia, in the northeast corner of Africa there, is a place called Aksum, A-K-S-U-M. And historically, and through legend, and what is considered really common knowledge, that is the area claimed to be Sheba, which is vehemently and traditionally claimed that by the people of Ethiopia. There is so much identification with Ethiopia and Sheba that the Ethiopian culture and identity is basically wrapped up in it. If the queen was indeed from Arabia, she might have looked something like this. If Sheba was actually in Ethiopia, she may have looked something like this. Now, if Sheba was actually in some other area of the world, we don't know, the queen might have looked like this. But that means that Solomon would have looked like this. And that looks an awful lot like Yul Brynner. And that looks an awful lot like Gina Lollobrigida. So they probably didn't look anything like them. However, we don't really know what the Queen of Sheba looked like. We're told through history and legend that she was very, very beautiful, though biblically speaking, we don't really know. They don't say that. back to our map, if you will. Let's look further at the claims of where Sheba is located. There are many similarities between Axum and Saba, which both say and claim to be the land of Sheba. There are two regions separated by the Red Sea, but many of their customs, much of the architecture, the literature, even the religious traditions are very similar between these two regions, which again, just separated by the Red Sea. For instance, the Temple of Yeha. I'm going to show you a picture of that there. This is located near Axum. It is the oldest building in Ethiopia. It dates back to somewhere between the 7th, perhaps, 5th century BC. It is very similar to temples found over in Arabia and around the area where Yemen is today and Saba. Very similar. By the way, this is the oldest building in Ethiopia standing today. And like I said, it's very much in the same style as temples found on the other side of the sea. Other similarities evident are in language, early religion, religious symbolism. They both have much similar pottery styles, which is a way we do identify peoples where they've traveled. They have similar types of tools and weapons. So the question stands, with all these similarities, was Sheba a large region that perhaps was on both sides of the Red Sea? Or might Axum have just borrowed some of the traditions, the styles, the religions, the pottery making of the people of Saba, or vice versa? Did the people of Saba steal some of the ideas, the thoughts, the traditions, the customs of the people of Axum? These are questions we just can't answer today. Some claim that Sheba was over in the southern tip of Arabia. Others, like Ethiopians, absolutely claim that the kingdom of Sheba was there in Ethiopia. Pretty interesting stuff. In fact, there was a book that was written sometime around the 14th century, although the stories in it are attributed back as early as about the 6th century. It is called Kebra Nagast, which means glory of the kings. It is a book written by the people who lived in Nigeria. It is a story of how the Queen of Sheba, who was the Ethiopian Queen Makeda, who actually lived, beautiful looking woman. This was the Queen of Ethiopia back about the time, dating back many years, about the time of Solomon, I believe. And the Ethiopians claim that this woman would have been the Queen of Sheba. She is very beautiful, as I said. Their story in this Kebra Nagast, or the Glory of the Kings, says that this woman traveled to Israel with a great treasure, where she met the famed Solomon. Solomon and the Queen then fell in love. They had a great love affair while she was in Israel. And upon her return home, she is said to have given birth to Solomon's first son, whose name she gave Menelik. Sometime later, the young man Menelik and his mother returned to Jerusalem, where she introduced him to his father, Solomon, who received him with great honor. When Solomon announced his intention to appoint Menelik as his heir in Israel and to sit on the throne in Israel, be the next king of Israel, Menelik, his supposed son, refused the offer, saying that he wanted to return to Sheba. Saddened that his firstborn son was leaving, Solomon ordered all of the firstborn sons of all of the elders in the kingdoms of Israel to accompany Menelik back to Sheba and establish a new Israel in Ethiopia. The plot thickens. Now, before Menelik departed, as the story goes, an angel told the son of the high priest of Israel, the firstborn son who was to accompany Menelik back to Ethiopia, told him to make a replica of the Ark of the Covenant. Big stuff here. And to replace the real Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies in the temple, make the old switchola and take the real Ark of the Covenant back to Ethiopia with them. So, only during, as we tell the story, so they do this, and during the journey, Menelik discovers that the true Ark of the Covenant has been carried in his entourage. In the meantime, Solomon has discovered that the Ark, he got the old switchola, and the Ark of the Covenant has now left the country and is on its way to Ethiopia. He is going to go after it, but before he does, he is divinely instructed not to have the Ark returned, and that it was God's will that the Ark, and along with it, God's grace, would depart from Israel and its people and reside in Ethiopia. What a story, huh? Now, we might just be able to leave that as a legend, a story in its sense, were it not for the fact that the people of Ethiopia wholeheartedly stand by this story. To this day, Ethiopian Christians claim that the Ark of the Covenant resides in this chapel, which is located next to a church called Miriam Tzon, which means Mary of Zion. Zion, of course, you would know, is another name for the city of Jerusalem. This chapel is the central church. This chapel and the church next to it, the Church of Mary of Zion, is the central church of the ancient Ethiopian capital of the people of Axum, and is a central holy place to the Orthodox Christian Church in Ethiopia to this day. Okie dokie. So, where did I leave off? Here we are. So, Ethiopian Christians see the presence of the Ark in Ethiopia as physical proof that they are actually now God's chosen people, both in the flesh and in the spirit. Their kings were seen as direct descendants of the house of David and rulers of Ethiopia by divine right. This view of themselves as the people of Israel, having come through the lineage of Solomon, thereby David himself, both in the flesh and spiritually, has led the church and the people there to some unique qualities in the Ethiopian church. For instance, the Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity sees many of the religious laws of the Old Testament and holds close to those in their orthodoxy. And not only in the New Testament, but like I said, much of the Jewish law they still follow in their Christian church. Ethiopian Christians circumcise their sons on the 8th day, just like Jews do. They observe biblical dietary laws, and they consider Saturday the day of Sabbath. In fact, a little side story here. In 1908, the Ethiopian emperor, whose name is Menelik II, this was in 1908, when speaking to a Jewish author, Jacques Fatlovich, who had translated several books from Hebrew into Ethiopian and was visiting with the king of Ethiopia, Menelik II, asked the author, when the emperor looked at some of the books, he noted some language he didn't understand, and he asked the author what language that was, and he said, "This is Hebrew." And the king said to him, "Would you please read some of these passages in the Hebrew? I want to hear the language of my ancestors." That's a true story. That happened with King Menelik and was documented. That's the story of Solomon and Sheba, Queen of Sheba. Quite a story, huh? It's exciting that story that dates back to about the 10th century BC is still today a story of mystery, a story of international intrigue, if you will, and a story which a whole group of people look at in a foreign land as being instrumental to who they are as a people and to their history in the land of Africa. That's all very interesting. The rest of our 10th chapter would normally sound like real big stuff, but after this story is a little on the mundane, even though it is an accounting of the great wealth that Solomon accumulated over these years in his time as the king of Israel. We're told each year Solomon received 25 tons of gold, plus the revenue from the merchants and the traders that I mentioned before passed through the land, the Arabians bringing in spice and gold, and ships coming into his port off of the Red Sea, off of the Gulf of Aqaba, and all the great wealth that was coming through Israel on its way to the coast of the Mediterranean to be pushed out throughout the Mediterranean, where those ships again picked up goods throughout the Mediterranean and brought them back to Israel to be passed down through the country back to the Gulf of Aqaba and sent out among the Arabians and the coast of Africa, and who knows where all they went to. We're also told that Solomon collected money from the kings of Arabia and the governors of all the lands. He had a huge golden throne decorated in ivory that had 2 large golden lions, one on each side, and 6 steps, and on the steps were 12 more golden lions representing all the tribes of Israel. We're told he had a fleet of trading ships that brought back untold riches to Israel, and he had a huge army with more than 1,400 chariots. Chapter finishes up by saying that in Israel, silver was as plentiful as rocks, and cedar as plentiful as fig trees. So, that's our story for today. I hope you've enjoyed that. There is a ton of material online from all kinds of sources about the story of Solomon and Sheba, the Queen of Sheba. Kind of crazy, some of the stuff that's out there. You might be amused a little bit going online and looking up some of those things. I got some of these pictures from offline by searching Queen of Sheba and looking for pictures from that, and there's pictures of all kinds of queens of Sheba. It's just a great story, and people have loved it around the world. I hope you've enjoyed me talking about this story with you today. Next week we will get into the 11th chapter of 1 Kings. Can't possibly be as exciting as this, but who knows, there could be some good stuff there. So I hope you will consider tuning in again, catching us next week as we continue our journey to Damascus. Thank you. We hope you have enjoyed our discoveries for today. Please join us next time as we explore the insights of the Old Testament on the journey to Damascus.